So, Juan, where are you located?
I'm just outside of Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, I'm in California. I'm in I'm in the same county as South Lake Tahoe. I like to say that because people go, "Oh, okay, I've heard of that place. It's nice," but it's much closer to Sacramento.
Oh, so you're in Northern California. Cool.
Yeah.
Different lifestyle up there. I actually haven't been to California at all. I've always wanted to go.
So, yeah. It's interesting the way that North America and South America are kind of lined up. The East Coast it kind of goes right down into the center of South America, and us here out of the West Coast goes out into the ocean.
Yeah.
So everything's kind of moved to the east.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Well, and well, your governor might well be a Democratic nominee soon. So.
Yeah. He's sort of a man out of time in a way. I think Gavin Newsom would have been a total shoo-in maybe even 10 years ago.
Really?
But now people on all sides of court kind of soured on people who are a bit too slick and Harvey Dent-ish,
Oh my God, he's just he's so despicable. Like everything about him is just. He's a really good debater and like, I don't know. I guess as a politician, he's about as good as you can get. But just that's kind of the problem, right?
Yeah, and it's weird. This is a little bit of an aside. It's not like this group I'm talking about has a lot of potency yet. But there's kind of a young right emerging that are just kind of unashamedly kind of Machiavellian and in love with like executive competence and slickness and even your physiognomy, the shape of your face. They're the most superficial right I've ever seen.
Yeah.
They really like him precisely for all of those slick.
For all of those reasons. Yeah, I've heard that before, actually. It's that if only we could just have that, but on the right or something like that, right?
Yeah. Because they think that, I liken it to the old phrase of pitting Democrats versus conservatives. One was the evil party, one was the stupid party.
Yeah.
And they would put all their chips on evil because at least it tells you that they're intelligent. and I guess they're thinking that at least intelligent people could be talked into doing the right thing, but stupid people, there's no hope. Maybe.
Right. I asked before. So you currently consider yourself to be more on the right?
Yeah. But it's a kind of right that is right by default. I kind of subscribe to the school that, to a significant degree, right is whatever isn't left, whatever isn't sort of the main left. So by that definition, a lot of self-described leftists, but somewhat wayward ones, are also on the right.
Yeah. But you're not pro-Israel. Or correction, unconditionally pro-Israel. Israel is the the greatest nation on earth that can do no wrong.
Right. I'm not pro. I think that's kind of a holdover from the libertarian days. Antiwar.com.
Yeah, good.
Used to wear their shirt and paid a lot of attention to people like that. Scott Horton, the kind of paleo. Yeah. Kevin, what's up?
Can you hear me okay?
Hello, Kevin. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Juan.
So Juan and I were just talking about, my background, and I want to get into his actually very soon here. Yes. How I used to be involved in kind of like libertarianism and somewhat paleo-conservative. With regard to Israel, libertarian paleo-conservative orientation does not lend itself too much to thinking highly of America's relationship with that country, right?
I think that what's important is Israel doesn't want to get rid of Hamas. Because they're
stuck backing them for years. Netanyahu, it was all a part of his plan.
Exactly. So if they wipe them out, they'll get the two-state solution. They'll have no reason to say no to that.
They can't do that. That's why he wants to start a war with Lebanon.
That he might be bluffing because that's not going to go too well for him.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the problem is he wants to stay in office. So
yes, that's what I find kind of interesting about this discussion here, because the hard-headed realists are the ones you typically associate with, there really are no innocent Palestinians. They're all the young men, at least, are definitely would be Hamas terrorists one day. Mm-hmm. So they think of that as like the kind of hard-headed, realist. I'm not going to, blow smoke up their ass with foolish idealist stuff. And yet they also don't seem to be. They seem to be somewhat naive about Netanyahu's own realpolitik situation, right? So they're not that hard-headed or realist.
It's so stupid because I consider myself to be a realist, but there's this idea, especially in like edgy like circles, that's like, oh well, if you're a realist, that means you by definition can't care about morality. It's like, well,
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, the point of realism isn't morality, but I mean morality it still exists. So
of course, but the problem is, so I don't think a realist would be judging Hamas on moral grounds, like completely. They're going to look at the balance of power and what is.
It's what is actually good for you. I mean, just because something is amoral doesn't automatically make it in your own self-interest.
For example, allying with Stalin in World War II. Maybe that wasn't the most moral choice, but it sure worked out pretty well.
But yeah, there's I recall an interview with John Mearsheimer on Unheard. The Unheard kind of does this let's see both sides thing a little bit.
Similar, yeah. It's a competitor to Compact, and I love Mearsheimer actually.
Yes,
and the interviewer thought that he had sort of trapped Mearsheimer in being both this kind of realist, but also
I know exactly what you're talking about.
That blonde guy on Unheard, he has British accent, maybe Australian.
Freddie Sayers,
Yeah, and he thought that he had sort of ensnared Mearsheimer in a kind of selective bleeding heart thing, which gave away his disdain for Israel. But I don't buy it. I mean, my God, people have a certain, evolutionary psychology should let us know that we're not these perfectly, amoral, realist creatures. And at a certain level, our heart bleeds for stuff. And I don't think that makes him some kind of a, anti-imperialist, America-hating, political thinker just underneath the surface. I don't think so.
Even then, it's like I was saying, you're conflating two things. It's like the thinking is that because it's amoral, it must be in our interest. Well, actually, there's an even worse option. What if it's amoral and goes against our interests, which is what I think is currently the case. So it's like, not only are you doing something that's evil, it's stupid.
Yes, I think that's Mearsheimer's point on Israel.
Yeah.
That the immorality of it is hurting us with the neighboring country in the Middle East, all over the world. It's dragging us down, and so that's why he kind of gets a little morally flustered.
If this escalates into a broader war, that's obviously not in our interest. But
people like Robert Wright, of Non-Zero, he's been like skeptical of Israel, skeptical of American intervention for a long time, without anyone painting him as some kind of left-winger or, some Pat Buchanan-style realist. And he has been saying that, what Israel's doing really isn't even good for Israel, especially if it can't count on American support indefinitely.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to some of like the leftist critiques too, and there's a lot of history there and whatever. But I'm most sympathetic actually to conservative critics of Israel. It's just, this isn't our problem. We don't want to get into another quagmire. Let's do us. Let's focus on our problems. Leave them the hell alone. If they want to, butcher each other, that's on them. We're just not going to provide them weapons.
Right. And I found that's basically my point. And like someone like Robbie Sove on the Hill kind of does this.
Oh, yeah.
Like his main point is, let's just stop funding them, okay? But because you need to constantly generate content, that's kind of a thin argument to just constantly be beating people over the head with. So you end up actually kind of moving into the dispute itself on the side of Palestinians somewhat. And I admit I've done that too. But that's really the main takeaway is just, why create a problem where you don't absolutely have to have one? It's Israel's problem. Yeah. And if I had my druthers, if you're going to throw a dart at a map that includes Israel and what you call Palestine, I'd rather be in Israel. That's a better place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also why these
questions put before us as Americans. So
Yeah, and that's where these leftist critics of the war in Gaza go wrong, because they're like, oh, poor Palestine. Palestine is so great. Hamas or freedom fighters. It's just like, it's like gays, trans for Palestine. Guys, you guys would get stoned to death if you set foot in Palestine. Like, they're just so stupid.
Yeah. I guess I am a little bit leftist because I'm not so sure about that, actually. I don't think it's like, I've seen enough kind of queers for Palestine type of thing in my own neighborhood of the Bay Area to think at this late date, you probably can be gay there and not get thrown off a building. I don't think you can have pride parades or anything, but
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, and thinking about my own background, I'm not any kind of ethnic determinist like some people on the right, but I'm Armenian and Armenian and Irish for the most part. This is what I mean too. And if that's your background, I think you're pretty damn predisposed to sympathetic to Palestinians.
Yeah. I mean, it's a screwed up conflict. I mean, but let's put that to a side and talk about a much more colorful and definitely less violent region of the world, Latin America.
Well, yeah, that would have been a very, very cheeky thing to say a few years ago, but now in El Salvador with Bukele. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his last name. Bukele.
And
it's the second.
I don't know in Arabic, but in Spanish people call him Bukele. Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting because his first name looks somewhat Arabic to me, and I'm not sure.
It is Nayib. Yeah.
Okay, is this some kind of strange?
Lebanese?
Oh,
he's actually of Palestinian descent, which is funny because he is conspicuously silent about the war in Gaza.
Yeah. He there's a strange sort of vaguely Middle Eastern Latin American overlap with him and maybe Salma Hayek and other people who kind of explode my mind like that.
Yeah, actually he was Muslim and converted.
Oh, wow.
His dad was like an imam. Actually, it's crazy. Apparently his dad was like originally Christian and then converted to Islam and then they converted back, but he was like an imam at some point. So
wasn't his father a leftist too?
Oh yeah. Decades long member of the FMLN and financial backer of the party.
We're pivoting now to a discussion of El Salvador and Latin America more broadly. So yeah, Juan, I got you on here for an article you wrote for American Affairs, the Bukele model, and
got a couple of behind me too.
Oh yeah, nice stack. It looks like it. This is summer 2024, so it's fairly recent, fresh. So yeah, you want to get into that article and maybe some of the misperceptions or accurate perceptions of what's going on with El Salvador and the Bitcoin president.
Yeah, President Bitcoin. Let's see. Yeah, he's an interesting figure and what he's done. I mean, I don't begrudge Salvadorans for worshiping him. The guy has like a 90% approval rating. And I actually don't even begrudge a lot of people that admire him abroad. I mean, Latin America, not every country, but definitely a lot of countries, and especially the important ones, crime and violence are a huge issue. So the fact that you can go from being one of the most dangerous countries in the world not so many years ago to arguably now one of the safest is a huge accomplishment. And objectively, the country is better off under his rule. That said, I mean, there's one the funny thing actually is that if you look at it in the aggregate, homicide rates had actually fallen a ton, like 70% before he took office. After he took office, they continued to decline, and then he had this state of exception in 2022. The state of exception itself is responsible since like 2015 for maybe like 5% of the decline in homicides. The thing is, though, it basically completely eliminated extortion, which is unheard of in a Latin American country. And it caused homicide rates to go down to a level that no one thought possible, like it's like equivalent to Canada or something like that now. But the how is very important, or why. Why is it that he's been so successful under the state of exception? No one in El Salvador has rights. Since March 2022, when he declared a state of exception, and he declared it actually because there was a spate of like 100 killings in a weekend by the gangs, mostly of each other, of other gang members killing other gang members. He declared the state of exception, and basically what that means is that due process individual rights are suspended temporarily, so long as the state of exception is active. And the thing is, he's renewed it every 3 months for the past 2 years. It's no longer exceptional. If anything, it's permanent. And the thing about that is, this makes perfect sense. No one has any rights. You don't have to, process anyone through the courts, criminally try them, have to find evidence, anything like that. You can toss them straight to jail. Once the 2 years later and with 80,000 people in jail, yeah, crime is going to go down. No one's going to commit a crime because they're definitely going to get you. You don't have to go through the courts. At the same time, thousands of innocent people very likely have definitely been detained. So it's a trade-off. Salvadorans are cool with it. Whether or not it would work in other countries or whether different populations would be willing to tolerate it, that's another matter.
Yeah, so the majority, as you point out, of the reduction in homicides and just crime in general, maybe putting aside what we'd call quality of life crimes. I don't want to get into the weeds quite on that level, but crime in general has gone away or gone almost wholly away. It sounds like, if it's to Canadian levels. But you say most of this has not actually happened during a state of emergency. So do you think Bukele and his fans are concerned that this will actually go away if the state of emergency is lifted, even though the record suggests that the odds are it should stay roughly the same for at least some time before another state of emergency might need to be imposed?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of questions here. Will he ever suspend the state of exception? It doesn't seem like it. And he might not, because as you alluded to, once he does, and on paper, you have to then try all these criminals. And actually what they're doing right now is doing these mass trials of like hundreds of gang members at a time. But so it's important to do that under the state of exception, because as soon as it's lifted, theoretically, you would have to try all 80,000 people individually. And the evidence to keep them in jail or in prison most likely is not there. They would go free. And this is the problem which has happened in both El Salvador and other Latin American countries. States of exceptions have been tried again and again and again. And most of the time, they led to only temporary success. While the state of exception was active, you managed to jail a ton of people, bring down rates of violence, and as soon as it's suspended, which eventually it had to, crime went back up. The thing in El Salvador is that before he declared the state of exception, he basically had taken over all branches of government. His party had supermajorities in the Congress. He packed the Supreme Court, replaced the Attorney General, has essentially taken over the media. There's really no checks and balances left in El Salvador. But on the other hand, that means that he can permanently renew the state of exception. Before, possibly, the Supreme Court would have stepped in and been like, hey, guys, the emergency is over. You need to end this. That's not quite the case anymore in El Salvador. So we could easily see a 10-year state of exception. Who knows? Impossible to know.
I wonder if we'll see some kind of unprecedented, combination of a state of exception, but the gradual renewal of civil liberties in a way that allows him to keep the stats looking good, but also have something like a fig leaf for the press.
Yeah.
How much is there? Oh, so go ahead.
Is there
Kevin.
Any chance that he will ever start releasing some of these prisoners? Is there some kind of process where they get reinstated into society, but paroled, but under strict conditions so that they don't go back to gangbanging? Or has he not gotten to that?
Some prisoners, after like outcries from families, have been let go. Essentially, when they've been able, whether they're well connected enough, they can prove that, hey, this guy that you arrested isn't a gang member. And as I've said, inevitably within the vast amount of people that have been jailed, there are innocents in there.
Of course, there always
you
are.
See, yeah. You see these long lines outside the what's it called? Like the outside prosecutor's office of Salvadorans trying to find out where exactly arrested family members are, and it's kind of an open question if he goes ahead and just massively massively convicts in these mass trials everyone who's arrested. Will there be an outcry from the broader population? Maybe, maybe not. People seem to be willing to live with it. It's just the cost of doing business. Okay, yeah, however many innocent people have been jailed, that's the cost of keeping the streets safe. It's a logical calculation.
One suggestion I heard from pro-Russian groups were that some of these prisoners would be released as soldiers to go fight in various wars as mercenaries or whatever, which would make a lot of sense if something like that could be worked out. And say if they fight, do their year and then they're free. Although there's danger they'd come back and be even more violent. So I don't know.
So you're saying that you've heard through the proverbial grapevine that some of these criminals are going to end up fighting for Russia?
The idea was floated that they would be sent out as mercenaries.
I actually haven't. Go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
Because there's a shortage of, say, first world warriors, and so you have all these kind of violent men locked up doing nothing. Why not give? This is what Russia has been doing, emptying their prisons and sending them to the front lines. They get very risky assignments. If they survive, they're free. And so why wouldn't that model be expanded, is what people are saying. I'm not saying that
or you're suggesting, but at least in that case, they have at least some kind of latent nationalist sentiment to fall back on. They're criminals, but we're Russian criminals. We're fighting Ukrainians. Why would El Salvadoran criminals give a damn about fighting Russia?
Well,
they wouldn't
unless they have some kind of incentive. I don't know. Other than
there's a lot to say here. I don't think that would happen. I actually don't know too well what Bukele's relationship with, or El Salvador's current relationship with Russia is. I think it's not that close. He does have close relations with China, but I think not necessarily with Russia. What you're describing actually basically is taking place right now in Cuba. Cuba is a close ally of Russia, has been for many decades, and because of the situation on the current crisis on the island, a lot of Cubans have signed up or have been recruited, in some cases questionably, by Russian services to go fight in Ukraine on behalf of Russia. And a lot of Cubans are into it, even if they hate Russia, the Cuban government, and most Cubans overwhelmingly favor the Ukrainian cause. But hey, it's a way to get off the island. In the Salvadoran case, as I said, I don't think that this scenario is likely, but El Salvador's economic situation is really, really bad, possibly the worst in Central America. There's still a lot of people leaving too, trying to go to the United States. It's not inconceivable, I guess, that some Salvadorans might think, hey, this is a way for me to get out of this country.
And to make some money.
So you write
exactly.
in the article, Juan, you write that despite Bukele's fawning coverage on the right, many of his defining characteristics resemble a distinctive political system that is not exactly free market, right? And it's not exactly Reaganite. And so you allude to that, or not allude, you actually point out that, these communist states that have been able to tamp down on crime, there's a kind of liberty-pilled element missing that would normally be very exciting to the right. In other words, these are strong states that have strong central governments. And this is kind of anathema to the right-wing, at least Anglo-American right-wing way of being big boosters of the market. So that's an element of the story that they tend not to really want to focus on. You want to talk some about that? Because you mentioned that their economy is not in fact doing very well, and yet this is the Bitcoin president, right? I believe there's even some of the charter city proponents, I think, have tried to woo him, and so surely their economy is doing great, and they love free markets. No.
Well, I wouldn't say that. In El Salvador, Bukele's presidency has been largely populist. It's fairly pro-business, in favor of attracting international investment, and he's deregulated in some cases, and he favors crypto and all of this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, he has boosted the minimum wage and pensions, kind of bread and butter stuff to secure his popularity. I wouldn't say that in economic terms he would be likely to go in, a socialist or a hardcore socialist or communist direction. But in terms, of just the regime type, he's basically turned the country into a one-party state. And the thing is, beyond communist states, but especially communist states, authoritarian countries on the whole tend to be low crime. You see the big exception here is Venezuela, which actually still has seen a significant drop in its homicide rate in recent years. But you look at the democratic transition in Latin America from all of these military dictatorships to democracies in the 80s and 90s. That's precisely the period when rates of violence really shot up. Why? For the same reason. Under a dictatorship, no one has rights. You can easily jail someone. Oh, you pissed off so-and-so who's allied to the party. You're going to jail. Oh, we caught you shoplifting, going straight to jail. It's not hard. And so, consistently, if you look at Central America, the countries that have kept homicide rates below 10 per 100,000 consistently in the past 30 years are Cuba and Nicaragua. Cuba actually, unfortunately, because of its current crisis, has seen crime rates go up. But prior to the past, 2 or 3 years, and some conservatives have actually even made this observation of the Soviet Union. In some ways, communist countries are kind of a paradise for, I'm being facetious here, but are kind of a paradise for conservatives. I mean, Cuba basically doesn't have a drug trade. How? Because of its horrifically repressive government. If you're willing to go the lengths to suppress drug consumption and production, the way that, a country like Cuba or China does, you can get rid of it. It just entails a huge cost, the surveillance state, etc. Similarly, I point out in the piece, the province of Xinjiang in China, where they've interned 1 million Uyghurs. Maybe these numbers are bogus, but according to Chinese authorities, their impunity rate is 0. They convict 100% of crimes in the province. Well, it makes a lot of sense. They have 1 million people detained. It's an insane surveillance state in a communist country. So,
I mean, let's not forget that Cuba in the 80s did things to curb the spread of HIV that would have had civil libertarians in the U.S. howling.
They detained hundreds of thousands of gay people, and for that reason.
I think that there's a Marxist element to the tough on crime thing. Marxists hate the lumpen proletariat, which is the criminal class. Ideology hate them, and who are parasites upon the workers. And so it makes total sense that they go very hard against this class.